All right, today we're going to dive deep into one of the biggest economic showdowns on the entire planet, the US-China trade war. But when you look past all the headlines and the politics, there's a secret weapon in play, something that might just decide the whole thing. So picture this. It's 2018. The US President, Donald Trump, gets up and announces a whole new set of tariffs aimed squarely at China. And in that moment, bam, shockwaves just ripple across the global economy. The stock markets go haywire, and a brand new kind of war is officially on. And that, right there, is the big question. In a war that's not fought with soldiers and tanks, but with tariffs and trade deficits, where your power is measured in dollars, who really has the upper hand? Is it China, the factory of the world, or is it the United States, the world's biggest consumer? To figure that out, we have to start with the main weapon in this whole conflict, the tariff. Now, it's a word that gets thrown around all the time, but what is it really? There's this common idea that a tariff is a tax that one country makes another country pay. But that's not really how it works. A tariff is just an import tax. So if the US slaps a tariff on Chinese goods, it's actually the American shoppers who end up seeing those higher prices right in their own stores. So why do it then? Well, the goal isn't really to raise a bunch of money for the government. The real strategy here is to shield your own local companies from foreign competition. Okay, let's make this super simple. Let's say Harley-Davidson wants to sell its motorcycles in India. Without any tariffs, a Harley might cost about the same as a locally made Royal Enfield bike. But then, India decides to apply a massive 100% tariff. All of a sudden, the price of that Harley doubles. So what happens? Most people are going to look at the price tag and choose the affordable local Royal Enfield. And just like that, India's local motorcycle industry is protected. And that whole idea of protection, well, that brings us right to the heart of why this trade war even started. It all comes down to a massive, undeniable imbalance in the numbers. Seriously, just look at these numbers. They tell the whole story. In one recent year, the US bought a staggering $440 billion worth of stuff from China. And in return, China only bought $145 billion worth of goods from the US. You don't have to be an economist to see that this thing is way, way lopsided. So when you do the math, that difference comes out to an absolutely enormous number, $295 billion. That's the US trade deficit with China. What it really means is that every single year, almost $300 billion more dollars are flowing out of America and into China that are coming back the other way. Now, from the point of view of the Trump administration, the goal was pretty straightforward. They argued that this whole relationship needed to be balanced. So the tariffs were basically a tool to try and shrink that huge $295 billion gap and hopefully bring some of that manufacturing back home to the US. So on the surface, it looks like a pretty simple fight, right? A battle of economic strength. But here's where it gets really interesting. If you dig just a little bit deeper, you find this hidden vulnerability, an unexpected weak spot that could totally change the game. Think about the kind of stuff America imports from China. We're talking about iPhones, laptops, cars, Nike shoes, toys for our kids. These are things we use every day, things we definitely want. But, and this is absolutely crucial, they're not things America needs to survive. They're wants, not needs. If push comes to shove, we can buy them from other countries, or maybe even start making them at home again. So the US has options when it comes to phones and shoes. But that leads to the real multi-billion-dollar question. What does China buy from the US that is so critical, so absolutely essential, that they have almost no other options? And the answer is probably not what you're thinking. It's not some kind of super advanced technology. It's not a sophisticated piece of machinery. Nope. The real answer isn't in a factory at all. It's time to reveal the secret weapon in this whole economic war. The answer is on a farm. We're talking about the humble soybean. And this one little bean reveals China's single biggest strategic weakness. Now, to understand why this is such a massive deal, we have to talk about pigs. A lot of pigs. See, China is the world's #1 consumer of pork. And to meet that demand, they raise an unbelievable number of them. Over 400 million. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's more pigs than there are human beings in the entire United States. And every single one of those pigs has to eat, every single day. So what in the world do you feed 400 million pigs? Well, their diet is pretty simple. It's mostly two things: corn, which gives them energy, and soybeans, which gives them protein. And that soybean part makes up a critical 40% of their food. Without it, you just can't raise a pig herd on that kind of epic scale. Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, why doesn't China just grow its own soybeans? And the answer comes down to one simple, unchangeable fact: land. China has a massive population crammed into a space with very limited farmland. We're talking just 0.23 acres per person. The US, on the other hand, has over 4 times that amount. So China has to use every precious bit of its farmland to grow essential food for its own people, things like rice and wheat. Soybeans actually have a pretty low yield per acre, so growing them at scale is a luxury they just can't afford. It really only makes economic sense in places that have vast, wide-open spaces, places like the United States and Brazil. And that makes China critically dependent on the rest of the world for this one single vital product. So when you put all of these pieces together, the trade deficit, the consumer goods, and now the soybeans, a much clearer picture of the strategic situation starts to come into focus.
What you have are two fundamentally different economic realities. China runs what's called a trade surplus economy. It makes way more stuff than its own people can buy, so it must export those products to the rest of the world to keep its economy humming. The US, on the other hand, is a consumer economy. If it can't buy something from China, it has plenty of other options all around the globe.
Let's break it down. China's need to sell phones is met by America's ability to just buy them somewhere else. But China's non-negotiable, absolute need to buy soybeans to feed its population is met by America's unique ability to supply them. That one-sided dependency, that is powerful leverage. And that brings us to the final thought here. You have one superpower holding all the flexibility of a consumer with endless choices, and the other facing the fundamental dilemma of a farmer who just doesn't have enough land. The stage is set. And the question that's left is, what's going to be the final move in this global chess match?